So we want to talk about which Annihilator now, because we get that question or those questions asked all the time. We have five different SKUs of broadheads, two different sizes of broadheads. We have the original, which is a sub 1 inch cut, 0.910. That'll leave about 1.5 inch hole all the way through your animal. And then we have the XL, three different versions of that. We have 100, 125, and a 150 in that XL, and that's about 1.16 inch cut and a 2 inch hole through your animal. So,
and that's really the number one question is not always which grain, it's which, should I shoot the standard or should I shoot the XL?
Yeah, I'm going for this animal, I'm going out here, and we're like, well, shoot whatever you want, because they'll all do the job. It just depends on, it's personal preference for the most part, barring what your setup likes, and most importantly, your effective range to shoot. That's
really what it comes down to. See, and I think you and I both make decisions on what we shoot a little bit differently, but probably pretty similarly.
Yeah.
So when guys come up to the booth or I'm answering on social or whatever it is, and they're like, all right, which Annihilator, standard or XL? I basically go right to, what is your effective range to kill an animal? Mm-hmm. Like, what are you actually going to kill an animal at? Not necessarily what you can, but what will you take a shot at? And if they're like, hey, 60 yards, like I'm never going to take a shot over 60 yards, then I'll ask them the next, well, what are the most shots you're going to take? Is it 30? Is it 20? Are you a whitetail hunter? Are you out west? Like, tell me a little bit more about what you're hunting and what your expectations are.
And then tell us your setup, and then we'll give you a recommendation, because the last thing we want is someone launching arrows that are inefficient in flight, or their bow is inefficient in poundage, and they're not an efficient archer. You're just, those three things, it's like the triangle of death. You're asking for a multitude of problems. So even though we could make more money selling you a 150 grain XL because everyone's touting heavy front of center, we won't, because we want you to be happy, but more importantly, we want that animal to suffer as least as possible with an ethical shot.
Right. In general, I just tell guys, if you're always taking shots under 60 yards, under 50 yards, just shoot the XLs, because there's not really a trade-off, compared to the standards, and they are going to produce a bigger hole. XLs put a 2 inch hole in an animal. The standards will put an 1.5 inch hole in your animal.
Yeah.
It's just what we've seen in terms of penetration testing. They're almost, they're neck and neck. It's maybe a 1/4 inch of a difference.
And then out to distance, if you were to go same poundage out to distance, you're going to lose a little bit of speed with that XL, where the original will continue to penetrate. It's a smaller profile broadhead, so physics-wise, that's what's going to happen.
Right.
So let's talk about the 100 grain original. That's our bread and butter,
the OG.
Number one, the OG. That's actually what's on this broadhead if I didn't have the extra 25 grains in the shank. So this is a 125, personally my favorite broadhead. But that original, we launched with the original 100 and original 125. And guys, when they came up to our booth, folks would look at it and be like, it's too small. And we're like, this thing's crushing bull elk through the shoulders. We're getting insane pass-throughs. And this is when we first launched a few years back, and that's just the we have two sizes. That's the smaller, or what we call the OG, the original broadhead, and that 100 is still to this date our best-selling broadhead.
Number one.
We think that obviously we know that that's going to change, because we designed what Brendan has, the 100 grain XL. We'll get to talking about that in a second. That 100 grain XL is an absolute beast, and that's that will be the whitetail head. For sure. And the feedback we've got from last year, from guys that picked it up in October last year when we launched, the XLs has been lights out. So
but who would shoot the standard 100? Anybody, if you shoot 100 grains, stick with what you shoot. Shoot the hundreds. Go with the OGs if you want long range accuracy with no tuning required. The XLs can have long range accuracy as well, but they're a little more finicky. Less wind drift. Like if you're out west and you're concerned, hey, I'm gonna take a longer shot, and in these canyons out here, it'll get going. I'd probably recommend the standard over, and then also crossbow shooters. Now that's a good kick to the 125. I actually love putting guys in the 125 standard if you shoot a crossbow, because that thing just shoots lights out, long range, a little more front of center. But I still like that standard profile because it's just less finicky, man.
And the cool thing about the 100 grain too is nowadays there's so many different setups up there where you can bounce weight in and out of your setup. To where you can stick with 100 grain, right? If we give you a 125 and that's what you buy, good luck trying to grind 25 grains off this thing. These things they're hammers. You're not going to get it out.
Right.
So you can't go back down in weight. But what you can do is you can load up your arrow and your insert with different companies that are out there now, and whether you shoot ethics or whatever, you can put weight into the insert. We're Victory guys, so there's a lot of stuff you can do there, but just go with what you're comfortable with. If you want to try something heavier, by all means, you can do that, but just make sure that you're spined right. Make sure that if you go up in weight, check your spine. You might have to jump up in spine to make sure that you're still legit. So,
and we give recommendations all the time on point weight. We love increasing front of center. If you're shooting a 100 grain broadhead right now and you have a 30 grain insert, can I just tell you, you're very, very light.
And you're shooting a 70-pound bow.
Yeah, especially
today's bows that are super fast. Yeah. So
definitely consider going up in point weight.
And stiffen your spine.
Yeah.
So the 100 and 125 in the original platform are the exact same size. The only difference is you gain weight in the shank, or we call it the shoulder, just below the bell of our broadhead. That's where the weight is still on the broadhead, and we haven't taken it off. So the 100 original or OG is the exact same footprint, exact same broadhead as the 125, same exact size, just the weight's in the shank.
So now Talk XLs, talking about exact same something, right?
Yeah.
So we actually tested the XLs versus the standard in a lab radar, and at 60 yards, they had the same drag coefficient to the 4th decimal point. Yep. So think about that for a minute. I mean, that's nothing. They basically
are the same thing.
Are the same thing in terms of drag coefficients. Now, there's this whole thing called lift. That's a little bit different, and that's why they would fly a little bit different from each other. Mm-hmm. But in theory, they would hit the same hole if you were, perfect shot.
Yeah.
Which I found super interesting. And so, why would the XL drop at long range for some guys? We tell guys that if you've been on our page, you follow us long enough, we'll tell guys, hey, XLs have the propensity to drop at certain arrow speeds out past 60 yards.
Yep.
So
if you match the lift of what's going on with the broadhead with your vanes on the back, for example, that's Brandon's setup. He's shooting a higher profile vane from Victory, as actually we talked about earlier, Q2I vane. Yep. And this is what I shoot on that 125. These are more almost target style vanes because the smaller or OG broadheads don't need that steering. So that 100 XL that he's got is going to be an absolute killer this season, especially for the whitetail folks.
Yep. So hey, I'm going to. I'm not. I wish I was.
Yep.
But for the guys that go, hey, I'm going to Africa.
Mm-hmm.
What head would you recommend I shoot? And I'm willing to shoot anything.
I would say either the 125 or the 150, depending on what your arrow setup is.
XL,
okay. For sure, because of the fact that you're going to get a little bit more cutting surface area. The holes are going to be bigger. And quite frankly, depending on where you go, what safari and what animal you're going for, they have certain requirements based on your total arrow weight. That's including the point and everything down to the end of the knot. So if you're going to go for Cape, which we went to the SCI Safari Club International convention in Vegas this last year, and we got eaten alive by outfits from South Africa talking about our 150 going through Cape Buffalo shoulders. With insane results. We had probably 5 to 10 outfits on our booth every day, showing us pictures, getting our contact. We actually got invited to go speak at FASA, the Professional Hunters Association in South Africa, because of what this broadhead's doing right now over there. And that's that 150 stacked up with weight is an absolute tank buster. So 125 will get you there. Same thing. You're just down in weight. All three of those XLs are the exact same cutting profile. All the weight is just in the shank and in the shoulder behind the broadhead, so they're exactly the same. So in essence, we have 2 broadheads, an original and an XL, but 2 sizes in the original, 3 sizes in the XL.
Yep. So pick your grain weight. I would say start with actually picking whether you want the XL or the standard, then pick your grain weight. Just remember, if you bump up in weight, check your arrow spine. Yes, you're going to increase FOC. We highly recommend it. Better ballistic trajectory in flight, more penetration. But just make sure you're properly spined. We don't want you out there shooting arrows that are inefficient. So.
Yeah, we're in that ballpark for the most part when we're talking about elk, deer, moose, all that stuff. Your 450s and up into your 500s are more than efficient to take any big game animal you want in North America out to 50, 60 yards with ease, especially out of today's bows. We're not huge proponents of insanely heavy arrows to go through. To go through these animals we have in North America.
And why is that?
Because you don't need it. Our broadheads will, properly delivered, this broadhead will dive through bone and go through anything in front of it with ease. You don't need a massive front of center where you're losing efficiency downrange at longer shots. You can keep a flat trajectory arrow that's stacked up with good weight and delivered the right way. We're about delivery, not about weight.
Yep, and I think to key on a point you're making, it's trajectory, and we are skewed. We're Western hunters mostly, so we do take longer shots. If I was only shooting 30 yards and under, I don't care if I shoot a 550 grain arrow, right? Might as well get more KE. I get that, but if you're taking shots over that and you're a Western hunter, that's the difference at 5 yards of missing your animal entirely. If you misjudge yardage or something, and he's at 65 instead of 60, and it's an elk,
and you're taking a guess, you don't have it at a specific mark.
Yeah, I mean that happens all the time. Animals move. You're shooting living beings, and your rangefinder is not an end-all be-all for yardage. They're moving, but for me, my shot sequence takes like at least a second and a half to get off. That's after I'm even at full draw, like meaning in my mind, I'm like, okay, I'm going to shoot now. Yeah. It's like a second and a half to get off, and many times I've had elk move in between that shot sequence, and if they move 2-3 yards and you got a 600 grain arrow and you're shooting 260 feet per second, you miss that bull elk at 60 yards entirely, or worse, wounded him.
Yeah. So just spine right, get your spine right, make sure your arrow's casting straight, your poundage is good enough for you to hold back for long durations of time, and then choose, like I said, choose any of our broadheads based on the weight ratio, your kinetic energy, what you're going after, and then most importantly, your effective range.
Yeah. And if you need any specific help, just reach out.